So, Dylan, one of the questions I wanted to ask you following your presentation that I saw, you spoke a lot about feedback. And one phrase that I thought was really, really interesting to me, you said, in your opinion, most of what teachers have been told about feedback is inconsistent with the research.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really interesting because we get lots of questions about what does the research say about feedback. I thought I would just get you to expand on that initial quote. What do you think has been inconsistent with what they've been told, with what the research findings have been?
So teachers are told that feedback should be timely. And of course, I don't know what that means, at the right time. Okay, well, there's no information in that statement whatsoever. But what they usually mean is it should be immediate. And the research is actually quite interesting on this point. It shows that, particularly for older students, delayed feedback can actually be more effective than immediate feedback. And we're not exactly certain why this is, but my hunch is that delayed feedback
Yeah.
acts as a kind of restudy. And because it's delayed, retrieval strength is lower, and therefore the time spent engaging with the feedback has a bigger impact on storage strength than it would do if it was occurring straight after the learning event. So feedback should be timely. People interpret that to mean immediate. The research doesn't support that. People are told that feedback should be specific. The difficulty with specific feedback is that it generally helps the student get a higher score on the piece of work they've just done, but it doesn't help them improve in the future. So if the feedback is too specific, it's just basically a post-mortem. Here's all the things that went wrong. And if the students aren't going to get to do that task again, then it doesn't help. And even if they are getting to do the task again, if it's exactly the same task, then the feedback has just told them how to improve their score. It hasn't given them anything to learn from. And so to be effective, I think feedback has to have a degree of genericness in it.
Right.
In other words, it must apply to more than one task. The purpose of feedback is not to improve the student's performance on the task they've just completed, it's to help them do better on a similar task at some point in the future, which is why I say that the purpose of feedback is to improve the learner, not to improve the work.
Okay,
People
so
say, go
just
on.
two questions on that, if I may,
Yeah.
at this stage. In terms of the immediate versus delayed, and you referenced the student's age as one example. I think I've come across some research that says even the type of task might make a difference if it might be immediate or delayed. I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
So there's quite a nice study about public speaking and acting, which shows that immediate feedback is probably more helpful for things that are relatively out of conscious control.
Right.
Delayed feedback is more helpful if it's helpful to reflect on it. So if people have got bad habits in the way that they hold a violin or a pen, then
Yeah.
I think it's appropriate to correct that immediately. But where things are under more conscious control, maybe delayed feedback might be more effective. I mean, I don't take a strong view on that.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that teachers are given advice about feedback that is definitive, and I'm saying it's a lot more complicated than that.
Uh,
Go on.
yeah, and I was just going to ask, in terms of when my second question was going to be when you talked about a degree of generalness
Yeah.
feedback, does that rely on hoping the students can transfer that feedback to different types of work? Because I've often noticed some students really struggle with this idea of transferring either in different subjects or even within different tasks within a subject. Is that potentially a bit of a barrier in terms of this effective feedback?
I don't think it's a barrier, but I do think it places pressure on the teacher to get the degree of transfer right.
Right.
So I think one of the things that we see is that some students are able to take an idea in one context and transfer it into very many different, quite remote contexts, and other students need much smaller steps.
Yeah.
So I think the important point is the teacher needs to judge what kind of specific feedback might be helpful, how far away from the original context of the learning should I pitch this new feedback, and all these things, like, five of these are wrong, you find them, you fix them. Well, that depends on the students having the skill to detect errors. So
Yeah.
it's feedback is all about the judgment that the teacher makes about what would be most helpful for this student at this time. And you also need to take into account the student's mood, the student's receptivity to feedback.
Yeah.
And so I just think these people who think that the the crucial feedback variable is just the quality of the feedback are getting it wrong. It's the relationship between the giver and the receiver of feedback that probably determines more strongly than anything else whether that feedback is going to get acted on. So just broadening it out into a much sort of less, if you might call it a psychological frame.
Yeah.
I think the work of Monique Bocart's is very helpful here. When you give students feedback or a task to do, the first thing the student says is, does this look like something I can do?
Right.
Have I been successful in similar tasks? Do I think that working really hard helps in this subject? This is a growth mindset idea. What's the costs and benefits? And so just broadening it out into that much more, I think, expansive frame
Mhm.
helps teachers get this right more often than not. And that was my
Yeah.
appeal really, is
Uh,
that
yeah.
is that the quality of the feedback does not reside in the information that's given.
Yeah.
It's in the likelihood that that will lead to productive activity on the part of the learner.